On a snow-choked Wyoming highway, a Navy SEAL slowed his truck when his K9 stiffened beside him. Through the whiteout, he saw something that stopped his breath: a 10-year-old girl pushing a wheelchair through the storm. In it sat her pregnant mother, shaking, exhausted, discarded by the man meant to protect them. The child didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just kept pushing, step by step, against the wind. That was the moment the SEAL stepped into the blizzard and made a choice that would change every life involved. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, subscribe for more stories of courage, mercy, and hope. Winter had claimed Wyoming early that year. The highway, cutting through the outskirts of Red Willow, a small, weather-beaten town pressed against endless plains and low mountain ridges, lay almost abandoned under the weight of the storm. Snow fell sideways, driven by a relentless wind that scraped sound from the world. The temperature had dropped well below freezing, and even the sodium glow of distant road markers seemed fragile, as if the cold itself might extinguish them. Noah Cross drove alone through that white silence. He was 29, built lean and compact in the way of men whose strength came from function rather than display. His shoulders were broad beneath a dark winter jacket, posture straight even behind the wheel. Short-cropped brown hair lay flat against his head, military neat, and a faint scar cut through his right eyebrow. Old, pale, and permanent. His face was young, but his eyes were not. They were gray-blue, steady and watchful, shaped by years of night operations, long deployments, and decisions made under fire. The pickup truck was old but meticulously maintained, its engine humming low and controlled. Noah kept both hands on the wheel, thumbs resting lightly, habit drilled into muscle memory long before this road, this storm, this night. In the passenger seat sat Coda. The German Shepherd was 4 years old, sable-coated, thick-furred, and powerful without being bulky. His ears stood alert even as he lay partially curled, amber eyes tracking movement beyond the windshield. A working dog through and through, Coda carried himself with a calm vigilance that mirrored Noah's own. This wasn't a pet. This was a partner, one who had pulled wounded men from debris, located survivors beneath rubble, and stayed silent when silence meant life. Noah wasn't headed anywhere important. That in itself was unusual. He was on leave, officially resting after a long overseas deployment that had ended quietly, without ceremony. No homecoming crowd, no speeches, just an order stamped approved and a plane ride back to a country that felt strangely distant. He had chosen Wyoming for its emptiness. Space to think, space to breathe. The radio crackled uselessly. No signal, no music, just static and wind. Coda shifted suddenly, lifting his head. A low sound vibrated in his chest. Not a bark, not a growl, but something in between. Alert, Noah's eyes sharpened. He eased off the gas instinctively. The truck's headlights cut through the snow ahead, revealing nothing but swirling white, until something dark moved at the edge of the beam. At first, Noah thought it was debris, a fallen sign, a piece of fencing blown loose. Then it moved again. Noah's foot hovered over the brake. The shape resolved slowly, horribly, into something human. A small figure leaned forward with visible effort, boots slipping in the snow. Both hands gripped the handles of a wheelchair, its metal frame rimed with ice. The chair's wheels cut shallow grooves through the snowpack, uneven, desperate tracks that told a story long before words ever could. "Jesus," Noah muttered under his breath. He braked hard. The truck skidded slightly before stopping, tires crunching into packed snow. Coda was on his feet instantly, nails scraping against the floor mat, posture alert but controlled. Noah killed the engine. Silence rushed in, broken only by the howl of wind. He opened the door and stepped out. The cold hit him like a physical blow, slicing through fabric, biting exposed skin. Snow soaked his boots immediately, but he barely noticed. His focus locked on the figures ahead. The child turned at the sound. She couldn't have been more than 10. Thin to the point of fragility, shoulders hunched inside an oversized jacket that did nothing to keep the cold out. Dark hair clung to her cheeks, damp with melting snow. Her lips were bluish, trembling, not from fear, but exhaustion. Behind her, in the wheelchair, sat a woman. She was visibly pregnant, 8 months at least. Her belly stretched the fabric of her coat, which was unbuttoned despite the cold. Her face was pale, drawn tight with pain and fatigue. One gloved hand clutched the armrest, the other pressed protectively over her abdomen. Her legs lay still on the footrests, boots dusted white, unmoving. The woman's breathing came in short, strained bursts. The child stepped instinctively closer to the wheelchair, placing herself between Noah and her mother. Coda padded out of the truck and stopped beside Noah, body angled slightly forward, protective but silent. Snow clung to his whiskers. Noah raised both hands slowly, palms open. "Hey," he said, voice steady, pitched low. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The girl didn't answer right away. Her eyes were dark and watchful, far older than they should have been. Finally, she swallowed. "My mom can't walk anymore," she said. Her voice was hoarse, cracked raw by the cold. "She's tired." The woman lifted her head slightly. Her eyes were sharp despite her condition, brown, intelligent, guarded. "I told her to keep going," the woman said. "Just a little farther." Noah's gaze swept over them quickly, automatically, assessing signs of frostbite, shock, trauma. The woman's hands shook. The child's fingers were red, swollen with cold. The wheelchair was cheap, worn, not meant for terrain like this. "How long have you been out here?" Noah asked. The girl hesitated, then quietly, "Since it got dark." Noah exhaled through his nose. "That's too long," he said. The woman shifted, wincing. "We didn't have a choice." Up close, Noah could see her better. She was in her early 30s, maybe younger. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose, messy tie, strands escaping around her face. There was a bruise along her jawline, yellowed at the edges, not fresh, but not old either. Another shadowed her wrist where the sleeve had slipped back. Her posture was rigid, pride holding her upright even as her body failed her. "What's your name?" Noah asked. "Mara," she said after a moment, "and this is my daughter." "Lila?" Lila tightened her grip on the wheelchair handles. Noah nodded once. "I'm Noah." He didn't mention the Navy, didn't mention anything beyond his name. Coda sat down slowly beside him, eyes never leaving the pair. Mara's gaze flicked to the dog, wary. "He won't hurt you," Noah said. "He's trained for search and rescue." Layla glanced at Coda again. Something in her expression softened, just a fraction. "Why are you out here?" Noah asked gently. Mara's jaw tightened. She looked away toward the empty road behind them, swallowed by snow and darkness. "He told us to leave," she said. "Said we weren't welcome anymore." Noah didn't ask who. Lila spoke instead. "He pushed her. She fell. I got the chair." Her voice was flat, factual, as if this were simply how the world worked. Noah felt something cold and heavy settle in his chest. Not shock, but recognition. He had seen this before. Different setting, same outcome. Wind screamed across the highway, lifting snow into sharp spirals around them. Noah looked at the road ahead, then back at the truck behind him. He could leave, call it in when he reached town, assume someone else would come. Someone always came, eventually. But not tonight. He reached up and turned off his headlights, plunging the road into a softer darkness lit only by the truck's side lamps. He took a step forward, boots crunching. "Listen to me," Noah said, voice calm but absolute. "This temperature will kill you. Maybe not fast, but it will." Mara met his eyes. For a moment she looked like she might argue. Pride flared there. Fear, too. Noah held her gaze without flinching. "Tonight," he said, "no one is dying on this road." The words came out quiet, controlled, final. Snow settled on his shoulders. Coda moved closer, pressing his flank lightly against Noah's leg, a silent confirmation. Lila stared at him, wide-eyed. "You promise?" she asked. Noah nodded once. "I do." The wind howled on, uncaring, but for the first time that night, the wheelchair tracks in the snow stopped moving forward and began, slowly, to turn back toward the waiting truck. The ranger station emerged from the storm like a half-forgotten thought. It sat a mile off the highway, tucked behind a line of bent pines that creaked under the weight of snow. The building was small and square, its wood siding weathered to a dull gray, windows clouded with frost. A metal sign, barely legible beneath ice, identified it as a seasonal outpost, unused in winter, unvisited, but still standing. Noah guided the truck carefully along the narrow access road. The tires cut deep grooves, then slowed as drifts thickened. He kept his hands steady, breathing controlled, eyes flicking between the path ahead and the figures in the cab behind him. Mara sat rigid in the passenger seat, one hand gripping the door, the other resting protectively over her belly. Her breathing was shallow, measured, as if she were rationing air the way others rationed food. Lila was wedged into the back seat, knees tucked up, arms wrapped around herself. Coda stood between them, braced wide for balance, his body angled so that his warmth shielded the girl from the worst of the cold leaking in through the doors. When Noah finally cut the engine, the sudden quiet felt heavy. Snow slapped against the truck, relentless. He moved quickly. The wheelchair came out first, its metal frame groaning in protest as he unfolded it. Lila was already at his side, fingers numb but precise as she locked the brakes with a practiced click. Noah noticed, filed it away. Inside, the ranger station smelled of old wood and dust. Noah pushed the door open with his shoulder, boots crunching over a thin crust of ice on the floor. The room was bare except for a scarred wooden table, a bench bolted to the wall, and a cast-iron stove squatting in the corner like an animal waiting to be fed. He helped Mara inside, guiding the wheelchair carefully over the threshold. She hissed softly as the cold air shifted around her legs. "Easy," he said. "I've got you." The words were simple, but they landed with weight. Mara nodded once, jaw clenched, refusing to show how close she was to breaking. Coda entered last. He paused at the doorway, ears forward, eyes scanning the white chaos outside before planting himself squarely across the entrance. His body blocked the wind almost entirely. Lila hovered behind him, close enough that her coat brushed his flank. Noah shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over Mara's shoulders before she could protest. "I'm fine," she said automatically. "I know," he replied. "Still doing it." He moved with purpose now, wood into the stove. A match struck, flame caught, slow and stubborn. Heat crept into the room inch by inch, like something learning how to live again. Noah crouched in front of Mara, gloved hands gentle as he checked her fingers, her wrists, her ankles. The skin was pale, blotched, dangerously cold. He spoke aloud as he worked, not for her, but to keep his own focus sharp. "You've got early frost nip," he said. "Not full frostbite. That's good. We'll warm you gradually. No rubbing, no sudden heat." Lila watched closely, eyes tracking every movement. Noah felt it then, a flicker of something old and unwelcome. Another girl, another storm. He pushed it down and kept working. He checked Mara's pulse, then placed 2 fingers gently at her wrist, timing the rhythm against his own breathing. Her heart was racing, but steady. He asked her questions, when she last felt the baby move, whether she was dizzy, whether she'd lost fluid. She answered in short phrases, conserving energy. Coda shifted his weight, but didn't move from the door. Snow piled against his back legs, melting into dark patches on the floor. He remained still, a living barrier between the room and the storm. Lila slid down to sit beside him, back against the wall. She tucked her hands under his chest, pressing her cold fingers into his thick fur. He didn't flinch. If anything, he leaned into her. Noah noticed that too. He wrapped a blanket around Mara's legs, then another around her shoulders. Her shivering eased, but didn't stop. Her eyes fluttered closed for a second before snapping open again. "Don't sleep yet," Noah said gently. "I'm not," she replied. "Just resting my eyes." He nodded, accepting the compromise. As the room warmed, the silence stretched. Outside, the wind rose and fell in angry bursts. The radio on the table flickered once, then died completely. Noah stood near the stove, hands clasped behind his back. The heat pulled at him, loosening something he'd kept locked away. He saw it without warning. A smaller body, a pink coat swallowed by snow, a set of footprints leading nowhere. His sister, Evelyn, had been 9 when she vanished, lost in a whiteout not unlike this one, a decade ago, while walking home from a neighbor's place. Search teams had found her mitten 3 days later. Nothing else. The storm had taken her, or the cold, or the dark. Noah never learned which. He forced the image aside and focused on the present, the crackle of fire, the steady rise and fall of Mara's chest, the way Lila had positioned herself close to the door, as if guarding it from the inside. "You're good at this," Noah said quietly, nodding toward the wheelchair. Lila blinked. "At what?" "Taking care of her." She shrugged, small shoulders lifting beneath the oversized coat. "Someone has to." Her voice didn't tremble. There were no tears, just fact. Noah crouched down to her level. "You did everything right." She studied him for a moment, as if deciding whether to believe that. Then she nodded once and leaned her head against Coda's shoulder. Her breathing slowed. Mara shifted in her chair, one hand tightening around the blanket. "Noah," she said softly. He was at her side instantly. "There's pressure," she said, "low and tight." He checked his watch, eyes on her face. "Any pain?" "Not sharp," she said. "Just wrong." He nodded slowly. Stress, cold, dehydration. The list assembled itself in his mind with clinical clarity. "We'll keep monitoring," he said. "You tell me if it changes. Anything at all." Outside, the storm roared louder. Snow stacked against the walls, burying the lower half of the windows. The access road vanished completely beneath white. Noah tried the radio again. Nothing. He moved to the window and peered out. Visibility had dropped to almost nothing. The highway was gone. The town beyond it might as well have been another world. He turned back to the room. Coda's ears flicked. He let out a low, steady huff. Not alarm, but acknowledgement. Mara's breathing hitched. She pressed her lips together, eyes squeezing shut for a second too long. Noah stepped closer, placing a hand lightly on her arm. "Mara." She opened her eyes. "I think something's starting." The fire snapped and popped. Snow hammered the roof. Outside, the storm sealed every path forward. Inside, 3 lives, and one yet to be born, waited beneath a temporary roof as winter tightened its grip. The storm did not loosen its grip. Snow pressed against the ranger station in heavy sheets, filling the air with a constant muffled roar. The fire inside burned steadily, but the walls creaked with each gust, as if reminding those within that this shelter was temporary by design. Outside, the world had narrowed to white and shadow. Noah stood near the stove, sleeves rolled, methodically laying out what little medical equipment he carried. A compact trauma kit, clean cloths torn from spare shirts, gloves, a headlamp with fresh batteries. He worked with calm precision, movements economical, purposeful. This was not panic. This was preparation. Mara's breathing had changed. She sat upright in the wheelchair, shoulders tense, fingers gripping the armrests hard enough that her knuckles blanched. Her face glistened with sweat despite the cold. Each breath came slower now, deeper, followed by a brief, involuntary pause. Noah knelt beside her, meeting her eyes. "Talk to me." "It's stronger," she said. Her voice was steady, but the muscles in her jaw betrayed the effort it took. "And closer together." He checked his watch again, counting silently. Not yet regular, but heading there. "We're staying," Noah said. Not a question, not a reassurance, a decision. Mara searched his face. "You don't have to." "I'm not leaving," he said simply. Across the room, Lila sat cross-legged on the bench, back straight, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her eyes moved between Noah and her mother, absorbing every detail. Coda lay at her feet, head resting on his paws, eyes half-lidded but alert. When Mara exhaled sharply, Coda's ears twitched. Noah reached for the radio again, though he already knew the result. Static. Nothing more. He pulled out his phone next, climbed onto the bench beneath the narrow window, and held it high. One bar flickered into existence, then disappeared. He exhaled slowly, then tried a different angle, closer to the door. This time, the call went through. The line crackled, thin and unstable. "Hello?" a woman's voice answered. Older. Calm. "Ma'am, my name is Noah Cross," he said. "I'm at the old ranger station near Black Pine Ridge. I was told you might still be in the area." There was a pause, then a soft intake of breath. "You found that place, did you?" "Yes, ma'am." "This is Evelyn Hart," the woman said. "Retired nurse. Been so for 15 years now." Her voice carried the unshakable steadiness of someone who had seen panic and refused to absorb it. "I have a pregnant woman here," Noah said. 8 months. Early labor signs. Roads are impassable. Another pause, shorter this time. "I can't drive in this," Evelyn said, "but I can talk you through what to watch for, what to do. You listen well?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good, then we'll do just fine." Noah ended the call only after confirming a plan, warning signs, breathing patterns, positioning. A fragile lifeline, but a lifeline nonetheless. He turned back toward the room and froze. Headlights swept across the snow outside. Not the diffuse glow of rescue vehicles, not slow, not cautious. The crunch of tires came next, too fast for the conditions. Coda rose to his feet in one fluid motion, a low warning rumble building in his chest. Lila stood up as well, instinctively placing herself between the door and her mother. The door burst open. Cold air slammed into the room, extinguishing the sense of safety in an instant. A man stumbled inside, tall and broad-shouldered, his movements loose and uncoordinated. Snow clung to his coat, half melted, half frozen. His dark hair hung damp around his face, unkempt, curling at the ends. A heavy jaw shadowed by uneven stubble. His eyes were bloodshot, unfocused, swimming with alcohol and fury. Behind him hovered another figure, slimmer, nervous, hands shoved deep into his pockets. Younger, late 20s maybe. Pale, sharp-faced. He smelled of cigarettes and fear. The first man's gaze locked onto Mara. "There you are," he slurred. "Jesus, you really thought you could hide." Mara stiffened. Noah stepped forward without raising his voice. "You need to leave." The man laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Who the hell are you?" Noah didn't answer right away. He simply stood there, shoulders squared, expression unreadable. Coda moved up beside him, head low, eyes locked on the intruder with lethal focus. The man's eyes flicked to the dog, then back to Noah. "I'm her husband," he said, "Caleb Rourke, and she's coming home." Lila's hands curled into fists. "She's not," she said. The words landed in the room like a dropped plate. Caleb turned toward his daughter, disbelief flickering across his face before hardening into rage. "You don't talk to me like that." "No," Lila said again. Her voice shook, but it did not break. "You don't get to tell us anything." The second man shifted uncomfortably. "Caleb, maybe we should—" "Shut up," Caleb snapped, eyes never leaving Mara. "You embarrassed me. You ran off like I'm some kind of monster." Mara's voice was quiet. "You pushed me." Caleb scoffed. "You fell." Noah stepped closer, closing the distance until Caleb had to tilt his head back slightly to meet his eyes. "You're done here," Noah said. Caleb sneered. "Or what? You going to hit me?" Noah didn't move, didn't blink. "No," he said. "I don't need to." Koda's growl deepened, low, controlled, unmistakable. Caleb swallowed. The silence stretched. Snow rattled the windows. "You think you've won?" Caleb said, backing toward the door. "This isn't over." His eyes burned into Mara, then Lila. "I'll be back, with papers, with people. You don't get to take my family." He staggered out into the storm, dragging his friend behind him. The door slammed shut, the wind howling through the cracks before Noah forced it closed again. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mara gasped. Her hand flew to her belly. Noah," she said. "Something just—" He was at her side instantly. Clear fluid darkened the blanket beneath her. Noah met her eyes, voice steady. "Your water just broke." Outside, the storm surged louder. Inside, everything changed. The storm reached its fiercest hour after midnight. Snow hammered the ranger station roof in dense, blinding sheets, as if the sky itself had decided to collapse. Wind clawed at the walls, forcing cold air through every crack that age had carved into the building. Outside, the world was nothing but white chaos. No horizon, no direction, no promise of morning. Inside, time narrowed to breath and heartbeat. Mara cried out, the sound raw and unfiltered, ripping through the low hum of the fire. Her body tensed, muscles pulling tight as another contraction seized her. Sweat beaded along her hairline despite the cold, dark strands plastered to her temples. Her eyes were open, wide, locked onto the ceiling as if anchoring herself to something solid. Noah knelt beside her, one knee on the floor, one hand braced against the edge of the wheelchair he had locked firmly in place. His jacket lay discarded nearby, sleeves rolled, forearms bare, hands gloved and steady. Almost. He could feel it now, the faint tremor in his fingers. Not fear, not doubt. Wait. This was not a breach, not an extraction, no weapon to aim, no enemy to neutralize. There was no manual for this kind of moment, no tactical advantage to seize. There was only a woman fighting her own body and a life pressing urgently into the world. "Breathe with me," Noah said, his voice low, controlled. Slow, deep. Mara's gaze snapped to his. She followed his count, teeth clenched, breath hitching before falling into rhythm. The contraction eased slightly, leaving her gasping. Across the room, Lila stood rigid near the bench, arms wrapped around herself. Her face was pale, eyes enormous in the firelight. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She watched every movement with the intensity of someone who knew there was no one else coming. Koda lay pressed tightly against Mara's side, his large body a living wall of warmth. His head rested near her hip, breath steady, ears flicking at every change in sound. When Mara shuddered, he shifted closer, fur brushing her hand. Noah glanced up at Lila. "I need you here." She straightened instantly. He gestured her closer, his tone calm but firm. "You're going to help me." Her lips parted. I don't know how." "That's okay," he said. "I'll tell you exactly what to do." She nodded once, hard. Another contraction hit, stronger this time. Mara cried out, her hand gripping Noah's sleeve with surprising strength. "It's time," she gasped, I can feel it. Noah's jaw tightened. He checked the clock on his watch again, then met Mara's eyes. "You're doing this," he said. "I'm right here." The phone crackled to life on the table, propped on speaker. Evelyn Hart's voice came through thin but clear, guiding, anchoring. "Noah, listen carefully," she said. "You'll see the head soon. Don't rush. Let her body lead." Noah followed each instruction with precision, repeating them aloud, grounding himself in the process. His hands moved with deliberate care, slower than on any mission he'd ever run. He could feel the tremor again, but he didn't stop. Mara screamed as the pressure peaked, her body arching forward. Noah braced, one hand steady, the other signaling Lila closer. "Now," he said softly. "Right here." Lila swallowed hard and knelt beside him, hands shaking. Her fingers hovered, uncertain. "You can do this," Noah told her. "Look at me." She did. "Stay calm," he said, "just like you were when you pushed her through the snow." That did it. Lila's breathing steadied. Her hands stopped shaking. Minutes stretched into something elastic and strange. The storm howled. The fire crackled. Mara's voice broke again and again, each cry tearing something open, not just in her, but in the space around them. Then a sound, small, sharp, alive. The baby slipped free into Noah's waiting hands, slick and warm and impossibly fragile. For a split second, everything went silent. Then she cried, a thin, fierce wail that cut through the storm like light through ice. Noah's breath left him in a rush he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His hands shook now, openly, as he lifted the newborn carefully and placed her against Mara's chest. Mara sobbed, deep, broken sounds of relief and exhaustion. Her arms wrapped around the tiny body instinctively, protectively. "She's here," she whispered. "She's here." Coda leaned in, nose twitching, then settled closer, his warmth enveloping both mother and child. Noah looked to Lila. "I need you again." She nodded, eyes wet but fierce. He guided her hands, showing her where to cut the cord with the sterile scissors. Her fingers trembled, but she didn't pull away. "Slow," he said. "You're doing great." She cut. The moment passed through her like electricity. She stared at her hands, then at her sister, then at her mother. Something shifted. Not pride, not triumph. Responsibility. The baby quieted, tiny fingers curling against Mara's skin. Her breathing steadied, chest rising and falling in fragile rhythm. Noah leaned back against the wall, heart pounding. He removed his gloves slowly, flexing his fingers. They were still shaking. He laughed once, quietly, breathless. Not from humor, from release. For the first time in years, he allowed the memory to surface fully, not as a wound, but as truth. Evelyn, lost in snow. A white night that never gave her back. He had spent years outrunning that loss, burying it beneath orders and distance. But here, in this fragile room, he understood something he'd never allowed himself to believe. He hadn't failed her. He had been meant to be here. Outside, the wind softened. The snow fell lighter, almost hesitant. Somewhere beyond the walls, the storm began to loosen its grip. Light crept faintly through the frosted window, a pale gray promise. Morning. Noah rose and checked on Mara and the baby once more. Both slept now, exhaustion pulling them under gently. Lila sat beside them, one hand resting lightly on the baby's blanket. Her eyes were open, vigilant, but peaceful. Coda lay curled around all three, unmoving. Noah stood watch as dawn took hold, the white night finally giving way. The road reopened 2 days later. A county plow carved a narrow black vein through the white, pushing back walls of snow that had stood like sentries since the storm. Sheriff vehicles followed, lights muted against the brightness of the morning, their tires crunching with deliberate authority. Wyoming winter did not retreat easily, but it yielded when pressed long enough. Noah stood outside the ranger station as the first truck arrived, breath fogging the air. He looked tired in the quiet way exhaustion settles into the bones, but his posture remained straight, shoulders squared. Coda sat at his side, tail resting on the snow, ears tracking every movement with professional calm. Mara watched from inside, the newborn cradled against her chest. Her face was still pale, but color had returned to her cheeks. The bruises along her jaw and wrist were impossible to miss now that the danger had receded. She did not hide them. The sheriff introduced himself as Thomas Hale, a man in his early 50s with a broad build and a face weathered by years of wind and hard conversations. His hair was graying at the temples, his voice measured, his eyes observant rather than judgmental. He listened carefully as Mara spoke, nodding occasionally, never interrupting. Behind him stood Deputy Aaron Cole, younger, sharp-eyed, her dark hair pulled back beneath a winter cap. She watched Mara with quiet empathy, her jaw tightening when Caleb's name surfaced. Caleb Rourke did not appear that day. That fact did not surprise Noah. Hale's men documented the scene, took statements, photographed injuries. Paperwork followed, slow and necessary. Caleb's behavior during the storm, the forced expulsion, the endangerment of a pregnant woman and a child, none of it vanished with the snow. An investigation opened, a protective order issued. Caleb's voice, once loud and threatening, shrank to something distant and administrative. Mara listened, her grip firm on the blanket around her baby. She nodded. "Thank you," she said, voice steady. The hospital in Stone Creek was small but modern, nestled between a frozen river and a line of low hills. The maternity ward smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. Nurses moved with quiet efficiency, their smiles genuine, their voices soft. Noah stayed in the hall as doctors examined Mara and the baby. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes closed briefly. Coda lay at his feet, stretched out but alert, earning curious glances from passing staff. Lila sat beside him, swinging her legs slightly, a paper cup of hot chocolate warming her hands. "Are they okay?" she asked. "They're good," Noah said. "Strong." She nodded, satisfied. Then, after a pause, "Can I go see her?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah, you can." Inside the room, Mara held her daughter with a tenderness that bordered on reverence. The baby slept peacefully, dark lashes resting against flushed cheeks, tiny fingers curled into the fabric of her mother's shirt. "She needs a name," Lila said softly. Mara looked at her oldest daughter, then down at the child in her arms. Outside the window, snow fell in slow, gentle flakes. "Winter Grace," Mara said, because she came when everything else was frozen. "And didn't give up?" Lila smiled, wide and unguarded. Life shifted quickly after that. A temporary housing placement turned into something more permanent when Noah made a call to an old contact, a town planner in Cedar Hollow, a quiet place an hour south of Stone Creek. The town sat close to a regional clinic and an elementary school with a strong reputation. Rent was modest. The people kept to themselves, but looked out for one another. Noah drove the truck again, this time with a different weight inside it. Lila pressed her face to the window, counting barns and frozen fields. Winter Grace slept in a borrowed car seat, bundled tightly. Coda rode in the back, ears flapping slightly as cold air rushed through the cracked window. The house was small, white siding, a narrow porch, 2 bedrooms and a living room with a wood stove that crackled faithfully. Snow covered the roof like a promise kept. Mara stood in the doorway, eyes shining. "It's enough," she whispered. "It's a start," Noah replied. He stayed. Not because anyone asked him to, not because it felt like duty, because when he pictured leaving, the thought felt wrong. He filed the paperwork to extend his leave, the process oddly simple. The military did not ask why. It rarely did. Time passed differently here. Days were measured by feedings, doctor appointments, school drop-offs. Lila returned to school. At first, she walked stiffly through the halls, shoulders raised, eyes alert. But the classroom smelled of crayons and pencil shavings, and the teacher, a kind woman named Mrs. Penfield, with silver hair and warm hands, welcomed her without questions. Within weeks, Lila laughed again. She ran during recess. She argued with classmates over jump rope rules. She brought home spelling tests with gold stars and stories about a dog who waited outside every afternoon, tail wagging patiently. Coda became a fixture in town. Children learned quickly that he was gentle but disciplined. He allowed pats, accepted treats politely, and ignored chaos with stoic grace. Parents trusted him instinctively. Noah watched from a distance, hands in pockets, the tightness in his chest loosening a little more each day. Winter remained. Snow fell again and again, blanketing Cedar Hollow in soft white silence. But inside the house, warmth settled deep. The wood stove glowed. Mara learned the rhythm of sleepless nights and quiet mornings. She smiled more. She spoke louder. Caleb's name surfaced once more in the form of legal updates delivered by phone and sealed envelopes. He contested. He postured. He lost. The threat he once carried dissolved into paperwork and court dates far away. Noah stood at the sink one evening, washing dishes while Lila set the table. Winter Grace slept in a bassinet near the stove, the rise and fall of her chest steady and sure. "You're not leaving, are you?" Lila asked suddenly. He paused, considering the question honestly. "No," he said. "I don't think so." She nodded, satisfied, then grinned. "Good. You're bad at goodbyes." He laughed, surprised by the sound. Later, as snow fell outside the window, Noah stepped onto the porch. The night was quiet, stars sharp against the cold sky. Coda joined him, sitting close, breath steaming. Noah looked back through the glass. Inside, Mara rocked Winter Grace gently, humming something soft and wordless. Lila lay on the rug, drawing pictures with crayons, her legs kicking absently. The house glowed with life. No medals, no records, no report would ever mention this winter. But Noah understood something now that he never had before. Some missions were not assigned. Some were chosen, and some, once completed, did not end. They transformed. Behind him, snow covered Wyoming in white once more. But here, in this small house, winter no longer felt cold. Some winters in life don't come with snow. They arrive as silence, as loss, as nights where the road feels endless and no one seems to be coming. And sometimes the miracle isn't thunder or rescue lights in the distance. Sometimes it's a tired soul who chooses to stop, a child who refuses to give up, a hand extended when walking alone would have been easier. This story reminds us that we are not saved by strength alone, but by compassion, and by the courage to stay when leaving would hurt less. If this story touched something in you, think about the moments in your own life when someone stood beside you in the cold, or when you had the chance to stand for someone else. Share this story with someone who might need hope tonight. Leave a comment and tell us which moment stayed with you the most. And if you believe that kindness still changes lives, subscribe to the channel for more stories of healing, second chances, and the bonds that refuse to break.